Oh my goodness, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to the Free Press Live, coming to you live from the Free Press office, the newsroom in New York City. A little sparse there today.
It's a Friday.
I'm Michael Moynihan. It is a Friday, and we have a great Friday show for you today. Olivia Reingold, you know Olivia, Free Press's own. She's going to explain how one of the go-to sources that the New York Times, NBC, Al Jazeera, and others have depended on, surprise, in the war on Gaza is actually a Hamas-linked official. Shocking, I know. Sean Patrick Cooper will call in, new contributor to the Free Press, to talk about the Black Lives Matter movement. Remember them? And according to Sean's reporting, the tens of millions of dollars the organization collected in 2020 was spent on lavish parties and luxury real estate. Not bad. Then I am going to dig into the revival of an old favorite. Since 1945, everybody is literally Hitler, including Donald Trump. It's made a pretty strong comeback in the final weeks of the election. But first, this is the best part. I'm joined today by the Free Press's very own Queen of TGIF. She's a 10. We talked about this before. She's a 10.
I established that very early on.
She is a 10. It's a Friday, and we have TGIF's own Nellie Bowles. Welcome. We're going to talk through a bunch of stuff.
You're so official. Look
I am
at you.
Very official. Look, I got a job to do here. They got a prompter who's trying to tell me to do things.
Oh my God.
But we're going to start with a campaign stunt that really made people angry for some unexplained reason, and it captured all of our attention on Sunday. Here is former President Donald Trump serving fries at McDonald's in Pennsylvania.
Never even touch it, huh?
Exactly.
I always wonder, wow, that's pretty good to go like that.
We will give them salt pancakes.
What's this sucker? They look like they were. How are you? Nice to see you. That's great. Thank you, man.
Appreciate all
Thank
the
you very
baby.
much. Fantastic. Hello.
This is my new baby boy.
How are you? Your new baby. How are you?
Doing great.
How are you? So this is compliments of me, okay?
Did he say this is complimentary? Is that what he said at the end? Was he just giving it away?
No way.
That's
he was
not
definitely
that's
charging
not how
people.
you start a business, President Trump. All right, the New York Times took aim at Trump for his poor technique on the fryer. That's actually true.
Well,
I think it was a joking.
It was really funny. Everyone
joking
took it
post,
real,
wasn't it?
First of all, let me just say.
All right, you're just going to get in right now.
It's
Okay.
a pleasure to be here with you, Moynihan.
Okay,
From
yeah.
our Vice days, how
Yes.
far we've fallen. Now here we are. We were on HBO. Now we're streaming on
We
Twitter.
were on HBO, and
Now we're
now,
streaming straight to Twitter.
Correct. This is. It's not even called Twitter anymore.
It's not even called Twitter. It's
not even a
off-brand
real
X. It's bad
thing
Twitter.
anymore. No, we have, ladies and gentlemen, have
A long
fallen
history.
from the mighty heights to an office in Midtown.
But I'm still stealing your vapes. I'm still stealing your vapes, which still bothers you, but you know what? I don't listen to that.
But we're going to do one thing about this. We're
Yeah.
going to do one more thing, so I want to get your opinion on this. Because he was serving the fries,
Yeah.
and Trump says that Kamala Harris, who claimed that she worked at McDonald's, in fact, never worked at McDonald's. We have no evidence of this. And the New York Times said this: Donald Trump has claimed without evidence that Ms. Harris has never worked at the fast food chain. Her campaign and a friend said she did. Without evidence, which I pointed out a long time ago, was something that stopped as a journalistic trope in 2020. It was like everything was without evidence. You know, people lie all the time. Donald Trump lies a lot. Politicians lie. That was a special thing reserved for him. The weird thing about this is she has also made a claim here without evidence, which is the McDonald's thing. We don't have any evidence that she's done this.
No, the Times came up with evidence, which
friend.
is a friend heard it from Kamala's mom.
Yes.
That maybe she worked at McDonald's. So
In the friend,
there
I
is all the
believe-
evidence you
I'm
need.
not sure if the country is right, but I believe the friend lived in like Botswana at the time. It was like the evidence was a bit of a thin read, if you ask me.
But it's just so funny that at this point, like a week out of the election,
Yeah.
that the obsession is not on any policies, not on any
No.
of this or that. It's on the McDonald's
Correct.
moments. Each one having their little McDonald's moment.
Yeah. So when you saw, you saw the reaction to this, right? And people really kind of, and again, this is the thing I don't understand. I mean, we live in a different universe. We live a little more on Twitter than the average person. Mm-hmm. Were people losing their minds about this? And the way that I saw people losing their minds on the internet, it's like, The guy is doing a classic campaign stunt. Nothing surprising about this, but it really exercised people.
It really did. It really bothered them that Trump had this sort of McDonald's moment. It looked kind of funny. It honestly looked like an AI image of Trump serving McDonald's. It looked freaky. But everyone ended up taking it extremely seriously and doing like fact checks and like I think the McDonald's was in a place called Feasterville, and then they were doing there were stories that were like
Feasterville?
A town called Feasterville. They were doing stories that were like the health record of that McDonald's. And then they were
there
getting
was one that said
it had health problems.
Yes,
like
they didn't pass it.
It was like a
an
deep
inspection.
dive. It was like America's political reporters descended on this one McDonald's to try to show that it wasn't an authentic shift at McDonald's. Yeah, no shit. Like it was so funny.
That was my favorite one when it was like, just so people know, the McDonald's, like, this was like a setup. It's like, well, I didn't think he got a job there. It was just like, just in case the election doesn't go well.
But it's like the
I gotta
perfect troll
shift
election.
here.
Because why is he there? He's there to troll Kamala because she said she worked at McDonald's.
Correct.
It's like trolling upon trolling upon trolling.
Is it unfair?
And that is the exit message.
Correct.
That is the message these candidates are leaving us with.
But Nellie, is it unfair in a way to put a candidate like Kamala Harris? And again, it's like what Henry Kissinger said about the Iran-Iraq war. I wish they could both lose, but they can't. This is the country we live in. But it's unfair in a way to put somebody who has very poor political chops, in my opinion, that's Kamala Harris, against somebody who has poor political instincts but is a very good troller. Because trolling in this kind of environment is a new form of politicking. This was not a case in 1960. Nixon and JFK were not trolling. But the troll is a real superpower.
The troll's a superpower, and he's the best troll politician we have.
Yes.
No, she doesn't troll. She's more dignified. I mean, she's more like serious in her comportment.
Yeah, and we're going to get in a second to the substance, if there is any.
She laughs a lot, but she doesn't tell a lot of jokes, I would say. She's not leaning into what I intuit when I look at her is I think that's someone who might be funny.
Yeah.
Like, I have a feeling that she might be funny.
She's not.
But she doesn't.
She's absolutely
but she
not funny.
doesn't allow herself or do that or for whatever reason.
Yeah.
She's not like leaning into being funny. But
I just think she's not. I think that she might. Nellie, I'm surprised that you were making this bold claim that she might be funny because there's no evidence that she's
I think
funny.
she's holding back some sense of humor.
Really?
Whereas he leans. But why should it be about who has a better sense of humor? We have the best sense of humor.
You
We
think
don't need
she's
our politicians to have better
Elaine
ones.
Boozler of this No, I would say.
I have no idea who that person is.
That's the joke. Nobody does. We can talk about Christopher Hitchens' piece about women being funny in a second too.
Oh, wow.
But that's not me. I didn't write that. But that you say that shouldn't be a thing. I think it actually kind of should be a thing for a politician to be well-rounded in the sense of having a certain sense of humor. We don't have a lot of
charming.
politicians.
We want them to be charming.
Like Reagan was charming. He wasn't funny, but he was charming. He could drop a line well scripted because he was a Hollywood actor. But was he a funny person? Probably not.
I think the Democrats on a whole have had trouble with charm and humor as a concept for a while.
I think that's correct.
You see it a little bit. Did you see the men endorse Kamala we're manly men and we like.
Yeah, they're like we chop wood. It was really, it was not impressive. Yeah.
Anyone with a sense of humor would have watched that and seen that it was hilariously funny.
Yes.
They thought it was like extremely earnest and an important ad showing that men support Kamala Harris and there's some sort of disconnect happening at HQ that
and that was written by I think a Jimmy Kimmel writer.
Yeah, it could have, but it wasn't meant to be funny. It was meant to be an authentic, American men support Kamala Harris ad. But
I would say this: before we get on to Kamala specifically. This is a thing that should, number one, make you lose your job in politics. When you have an ad like this, a very good point, because when you see that, the one thing it really underscores for people is that coastal elitism is real. That the guy who wrote this commercial was literally a comedy writer for Jimmy Kimmel. I don't know where he's from, but he lives in LA. And someone saw that, made that ad, everyone looked at this and said, this is great. And you need somebody who actually understands
I agree.
the other parts of America.
Those coastal
I
elites
don't
are out
call
of
them
control.
real America. We're all real
which
Americans.
is why me and you, such rural Americans, authentic and from the Midwest, should be
Oh, I hate everyone who doesn't live in my zip code. Just for a record. All right.
Coastal elite, a gay
I'm
from
fine.
LA.
Yeah, you're a gay from LA.
I am the most
Yeah.
coastal of the most
Yeah.
elites that could ever gay.
I will say you are a lesbian elite in other Pennsylvania.
But let me tell you about real America. I'll tell you what.
We'll get to it. Pennsylvania campaign trail news. Vice President Harris joins CNN's Anderson Cooper for a absolutely dreadful town hall in the critical swing state on Wednesday night. Take a look at this clip.
There's something you can point to in your life, political life, or in your life in the last 4 years that you think is a mistake that you have learned from?
I mean, I've made many mistakes, and they range from, if you've ever parented a child, you make lots of mistakes too. In my role as vice president, I mean, I've probably worked very hard at making sure that I am well versed on issues, and I think that is very important. It's a mistake not to be well versed on an issue and feel compelled to answer a question.
This is me doing a job interview. My biggest challenge, my weakness is how seriously I take my work.
Yeah,
it's too much. I put
yeah,
aside
I work-
everything
I work
else for
too
my
hard.
work. I work.
Yeah, that the great thing about that, Nellie, is because of a small and unforeseen technical issue, you didn't even actually hear that.
No, but
You
I
didn't
know.
have to.
I know what she was saying.
I saw you like looking and knowingly nodding at that clip, despite not being able to hear it. I could, and I wish I didn't. So that's like the amazing thing about this, and I want to ask you specifically, because I know you watched at least some of this, is we just have to be objective about this. And I'm telling you this as an objective observer who doesn't like either of these people. She is bad at this. It cut back on CNN to David Axelrod, who is a Democratic grandee, and he said this was actually bad. This was not good.
I think we should be fair and objective.
Yeah.
And I think that she does look beautiful and looks great doing it. She looks great.
She's looking
10,
good. Yes.
so-
Yeah, well, your scale is way off, but okay.
No, I'm kidding. No. She seems to really struggle with like the really obvious questions that you would have answers for, such as what are your weaknesses? Do you have any mistakes? These are things that you would imagine someone would have prepped her on, and she would just like have a great answer, move along, keep it flowing, and it seems like she's not able to do that, and I'm kind of confused why. And like there's some of the questions where it's like really specifics about policy stuff where I would expect her not to know all that because it's like, who knows that? And Trump doesn't know that
But
stuff
you should
either.
be able to bullshit an answer. Too.
Yeah, but like she can't bullshit.
And she can't.
And it's really an interesting thing because it turns out that running for president, being able to bullshit is like a huge part of that job.
Yeah.
And you don't realize it until you watch someone who really isn't able to do as much bullshitting and charming in that way.
No,
like
it is
she
weird.
can't just answer that question, tell a little joke and move on.
I mean, you have politicians, and I've seen them throughout my career, I've talked to many of them, who aren't particularly good at certain elements of it, right? But when you elevate somebody to the presidency, vice presidency in this case, and then just the coronation as the candidate, you expect them to have at least all the basic tools, right? I mean, it's very, very problematic for any journalist to ever make a sports analogy, and I retch at it, but I
won't understand it at all.
Well, no, I mean, you'll understand it the basic way. It's like, this person is a very good fielder, but they don't have an arm to throw the ball. It's like you get one of the things, but no, you need both of them. Once you catch it, you got to throw it to first base. You have a few of the tools, but to be a presidential candidate, you need all of them. And the distraction for her is that what you want to do right now is convince Americans who are unsure convince people. Donald Trump makes things up and says, we're not going to tax tips. And my driver at the RNC was like, I'm now voting for him. That is amazing. And it's like,
No, she cannot make anything.
no,
she's
she's behind me. Like, no,
she's
I'm not going to tax tips either. It's like, you have no political chops. This is why you're going to lose. If she loses in however many days that we are, 10 days or something like this, They have no one but themselves to blame for not having a proper primary.
I know.
She couldn't win her own state.
Well,
she dropped out before her own state in 2020.
What they maybe should have done is like before any of these events, like before a town hall,
Yeah.
give her a little Sauv Blanc.
Yeah.
A glass.
Yeah.
Just a little.
Maybe some Adderall.
Just loosen up. It's remarkable. It's remarkable to see how befuddled she is by the questions that seem really obvious. And you're watching it and you're sort of like, you can do this one, you can do this one. And she's like, I can't believe someone would ask me about the border. I've never been to the border. I don't know. And you're like, you were the border czar. You can have, even if it went badly, even if it was a disaster, you can come up with, which it was, you can come up with a line or two. But like for some reason,
was, I've never been to Europe either.
I think
Which is,
that
I don't even know if that's true.
I think that the Democrats have gotten themselves into thinking that like they don't need to answer questions at all, like not even just questions from an aggressive media or like Fox News reporter type people, but that they don't need to answer any questions.
Yeah.
Like she's not even giving interviews to the New York Times. She's not even sitting down with what would be really friendly places where she should be all the time. Like,
well, Anderson Cooper is pretty friendly to her, not.
No, I know exactly.
Yeah.
And she's completely baffled by it.
She's completely baffled by it.
And seems offended that these questions are even being asked.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is a job interview for the biggest job in the country, maybe the world. And like, you got to be ready to answer some of these things.
Look, before I was going to say one thing, but this is my political consultancy gig that just began today.
No, I know. I feel like we should be getting paid by the DNC right now.
These dumb morons who rake in millions of giving these people such bad advice. I will just say one thing about this is that if you're going on a date, right, do not try to be everything to that person. You have to pick a side. You have to be something somewhere. You can't, like, what Democrats have been doing for this entire election is like, I'm for fracking, but I'm against it. But I love fracking, but I very much oppose it. It's like, we don't want to offend anyone, so we're going to take this middle path. It's like, take a bloody position and people will respect you more. Explain away your changes in a way that's like, look, I've evolved on this issue. Don't try to, run away from everything.
Yeah.
Running away from things does not convince voters of anything.
She has a uniquely hard path in that because she staked out wildly left-wing positions a few years ago. So it's very hard to then be like, actually, all of those I disagree with, and now I'm just this moderate person, because it's not like it was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
It's really recent that she was really against all the things she now is sort of saying she's for. And it's an uphill battle in that front.
Yeah, I mean, she did burn down a police station in Minneapolis. Personally,
she threw the firebomb.
She was the only one there. We literally have video of this, and no one cares. Nellie Bowles, one of my favorites.
Oh, you're sending me off.
Yeah, but
that's all I get?
It's not a Bergman movie. We have segments.
I thought I was here for a couple hours. I thought we were shooting this shit. Have a little weed. I thought we were doing. Isn't this on Twitch?
Well, you can stay if you want, like the person that pushes down on the couch on a talk show. But because up next, Olivia Reingold, and she's going to be talking. It's going to be great.
It's going to be great.
It's
fine.
Not as good as you, but it's going to be great.
Okay.
And
I get it.
Before we get to Olivia, so we can swap out Nellie. We're going to have a look at our latest episode of the swing state debates. If you haven't watched them, they're great. That ask Jewish voters in Pennsylvania, Harris or Trump. Be right back.
It's hard to, commit to Israel's self-defense when in the same breath you are calling for a ceasefire. Because until Hamas is eradicated, we are not safe. And they have said they will do it again, and we have to believe them because they are continuing to fire rockets every single day. We can compare what they said in speeches and who they get lunch with and who they get dinner with and who they brush their teeth with. But at the end of the day, let's compare the record, okay?
Yeah.
President Trump left a terrible Iran deal. He enforced sanctions on Iran. He cut them off from viability and, growing. And then Biden came back in and, took those sanctions away, gave them $16 billion. Trade between Iran and America has gone up 43% in the past year. He put Iran in a position of financial stability to fund all this terror that's causing all this upheaval and instability in the world.
I agree on that level of an Iran policy, and what I'm concerned in a Trump administration is that there are certain elements of his policy team who advocate for isolationism, and I think that Israel is potentially abandoned in those situations if you're not going to...
This is a concern I have as well.
I think we all agree on that.
Not that it really matters.
Isn't it great when everyone agrees with me?
Because I'm not. I think
we'd love to hear what you think.
No. I think what you said. I'm so glad I'm not in charge of any of this, and my job is just to ask people questions. Because I think what you said is really compelling to me. But Iran is also much closer, or so we are told, to having a nuclear weapon than they were under the Iran deal.
I don't think that deal did anything to stop Iran from developing their weapons. It just gave them, it actually allowed them to, have money to fund all these things. And I think that's a really strong underlying problem of all the terror and all the, the instability that we see in the world. So, Trump, wasn't my first pick, but in a binary option between two people, one that's been weak on Iran, one that's strong on Iran, I'm going to go for the one that has been stronger on Iran and has weakened terror.
All right, you should be watching that series over at the Free Press website, thefp.com. And we are back now with a staff member of the Free Press.
Hi.
Olivia Reingold, you have a new story up. You never stop producing material. You produce a lot, I gotta say. Because I'm trying to remember which one this is. The headline in this one, why is the New York Times not disclosing a source's ties to Hamas? The least surprising headline.
The truth is, I don't know the answer. I just know that they did not disclose. They certainly did not disclose the links.
What is this story? Give us a little background on what this story is all about.
So this actually came to us as a tip, and it's one of those things where it's, hidden in plain sight. Mm-hmm. So the New York Times, since October 7th, has cited this guy, Hussein Adwa, 4 times, and NBC News has cited him too, Al Jazeera has cited him also, and none of them have disclosed the fact that he is thoroughly linked to the Hamas-controlled municipality of Gaza.
And you mentioned at the top of the piece that he's on an episode of The Daily, the popular podcast from the New York Times, who's just mentioned as Hussein. So you can't really Google him and see who this guy is.
Yeah, and it's not just any episode of The Daily. It is their commemorative episode from this year on October 7th to reflect upon the terrorist attack. And he's just introduced as Hussein, a Palestinian man living in Gaza. And it's very
all of which is true.
It is true.
But
it
not
is true.
Full
it's
representation
not. It is not a full picture.
Yeah.
And when you compare that to the fact that the Israeli was introduced, name, age, even where he was born, a snapshot into his politics, they really lacked that same scrutiny for Hussein's track record, which if anyone had just bothered to Google him, he publicly discloses on his LinkedIn that he is connected to, the Hamas-controlled government of Gaza, which he ran public relations for about 8 years. And
to be clear, this is the thing. I mean, nothing really surprises me about these sorts of stories. But when I saw that he did PR for the government of Gaza, which was run by Hamas, which is an authoritarian, running a government as an authoritarian regime, that kind of shocked me.
It's not just any job, right?
It's not just any job, because I think that, by the way, I would support this if you have an Israeli on there who was running PR for the Likud party. I would say, you should know that. You should know that. I'm
absolutely
perfectly happy with everyone being identified.
Absolutely, and just to clarify, what that position might have been, the words of a source I spoke to who used to analyze, terrorism data for the Treasury, he said that Adwa was likely providing propaganda to advance the mission of Hamas. So anyway, that's what PR might have been. But really, when you look at just the asymmetry of how, let me take you back to, I think it might have been this past spring when the New York Times published this watershed report at Hamas's horrific use of rape and sexual violence against women on October 7th. And when producers of The Daily, their flagship podcast, were assigned to turn this into an audio episode, they revolted. You know, oh, whoa, rape, October 7th? We've got to fact check this. This does not meet our standards. But then this is the same team that, to commemorate October 7th, they introduced this guy as Hussein, a Palestinian living in Gaza.
I mean, I also was always amazed by these internal revolts. I'm not amazed by them. I know people that work there, so I know the type of politics they have. But when they're revolting on something like that, on a rape story from the newspaper that kind of kicked off the Me Too movement in a lot of ways, with the Harvey Weinstein reporting, some of the not so good reporting on the place I used to work at Vice, the fact checking was a little looser back then than you know, on this day of a mass murder. That how could you think that these people would sexually assault? The question I ask here, how do these people get into the New York Times kind of bloodstream? This guy's a PR guy, so there's obviously a PR operation. The Israelis do it, the Palestinians do it. How are they finding these people in a place that is, you know, under siege, that you have to essentially go in with the IDF if you're going in, or people who go in as doctors go in through Egypt? How are they finding these people to say, we need you as a guest in our show, and you just happen to be a member of the Hamas government?
Record some audio for us too.
Yeah.
I will say that, you know, when I reached out to Hussein, I was shocked. I sent him a message on Instagram, and I was shocked to see him reply almost instantly. And then he called me, and I'm just gonna say it was a great connection, like clear as day.
Really?
Yeah. So anyway, he was quite accessible, but that is a huge element that I don't understand. How was he cited, you know, by NBC News, which introduced him as a computer engineer. I don't know if that was like a mistranslation, but the man, I'm sure, uses a computer, but a computer engineer, I don't know about that.
He has an Instagram, which takes a bit of engineering.
He does.
But, you know, look, and I just want to be clear about this, because I know people don't take these things in good faith, is that we want to hear the stories of people in Gaza.
Yes.
I mean, the Free Press has published stories of people in Gaza, these Voices of Gaza series. But the issue is not hearing from people in Gaza. I mean, we need more of that rather than less. It is just a journalistic thing of like just being open about who these people are and what their message is. Because in times of war, everybody has a message to get out, and the truth gets mangled, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just think that really why this story is important, because hopefully it causes places like the New York Times to just apply, you know, I think they are effectively applying the scrutiny on the Israeli side. And I'm just gonna say 9 times out of 10, that's warranted. And, that is a good, valiant effort to disclose a source's links to the IDF, however tenuous. They just need to apply that same scrutiny to their sources in Gaza. And the fact that, you know, a team like The Daily that said that the story on Hamas's use of rape didn't meet their fact-checking standards, the fact that they're not prioritizing that same standard to their sources in Gaza, I think, you know, is sign of a great bias.
I think that people should always be aware of this, that, you know, rather than suggesting that there's a conspiracy afoot, is that there's a certain laziness in journalism when you're doing a piece about Gaza and maybe Jazeera has done it, and you have the name, and you find that person. People start recycling those people who you know are reliable. You know they speak English, first of all, and you know you can probably get a hold of them because they have an Instagram account. When you spoke to him, what was the conversation like?
So it was a lot of just like, why are you doing this? Like, why are you trying to talk about politics? He did just, you know, I should probably read off what he said, which was, anyone knows me would know that I am far away from politics, and I don't agree with Hamas. I only believe in humanity. And by the way, none of the organizations I worked with is controlled by Hamas. And then he said, like, the emoji that's not just like laughing, but like crying, laughing. Like, anyway.
It's a hilarious, hilarious sentence.
It's hilarious.
He just gave you I think one of the things that makes me suspicious, by the way, is that when you say, I don't like and I don't agree, with Hamas, that is a dangerous thing to say.
Yeah,
in Gaza.
it is. Yeah.
When you work for Hamas and you're tasked with kind of convincing the outside world of certain things, I imagine you'd get away with saying that. Or maybe I'm being a little too conspiratorial. I don't know.
Well, one possible element at play is that when we spoke, it was maybe a day or two after Sinwar had been killed.
Yes.
And so obviously things in Gaza are shifting quickly. Alliances could be changing. That could be a factor too.
Olivia Reingold, you're always a big fan. I mean, we play these videos of people like, why are you a subscriber? And they're always talking about you. They never talk about me. I am really the just backbone of this organization, and no one talks about it. They always talk about it.
You need a compliment. You need a compliment today.
You can text it to me. You don't have to do it.
I'm a Moynihan fan.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I had to really force that one, but thank you very much. And we're excited to see what you have next. There'll probably be something in the hopper on Monday, I'm sure. You got something cooking?
It could, maybe Tuesday, but it's going to be soon. Yeah.
But you're going to have Olivia Reingold back in your inbox soon. All right, we'll be right back with Sean Patrick Cooper. Bit of a Fanian name. But first, here's another moment from our swing state debate in Pennsylvania.
Compare what they said in speeches and who they get lunch with and who they get dinner with and who they brush their teeth with. But at the end of the day, let's compare the record.
I think he's a piece of shit. I cannot stand to hear him speak. I think he's an absolutely horrible person, and I think he will absolutely ruin this country.
If I thought that anti-Semitism on the left was an extreme faction, small, manageable, I'd be sitting over there.
If you compare the DNC to the RNC was a love fest for Israel. People walked around with their yarmulkes, Israel, I love you.
I mean, we're just going to disagree on this. I mean, obviously.
Can I change who I'm going to vote for?
Yeah.
I think I do know. I am going to vote for...
Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. And in the wake of George Floyd's death, Black Lives Matter took over $90 million in donations. But just how much of that money actually went to the cause? Sean Patrick Cooper, welcome to the show. And Sean, we just have to be honest about technical screw-ups. My headphones just dropped somewhere. So you can do a song. You can do a monologue as I put these in.
I can
because
play
this
Spotify,
show is live,
but,
and we are wildly unprofessional. Sean, I got my headphones in. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good, Michael. Good to see you.
So give us a sense. I mean, we all heard back in the day, the New York Post reported on a bunch of this stuff, that this woman, Patrice Coolers, one of many people involved in this, had bought, I think, 4 houses. I mean, give us a little sense of what happened here, because I know that they took in a lot of money over a very short period of time, and you looked into it. Like, what did you discover?
Yeah, it was sort of a historic amount of money in a very short period of time. It's hard to remember if we go back to 2020, the protests after George Floyd's death. That year, Black Lives Matter accumulated $90 million in donations. There's been reports like the one you mentioned of where that money has gone. A lot of it is still unaccounted for. We're not sure where all of it actually is. And this is sort of gets to, I think, the news peg here. There's 2 recent issues that have come up with the movement and the various satellite organizations. And I think we can, dive into those and then kind of zoom back out and see what that kind of implies for the movement itself. On October 3rd, Sir Major Page, who was the controversial chapter head of BLM Atlanta, was sentenced to a 42-month federal prison stint for money laundering and embezzlement. He had taken what was about 18,000 donations worth about $450,000 and spent it largely on himself. He had bought a house. He had paid off some expensive bar tabs, tailored suits, some wild nights out. And I think that, going back to that 2020 period, it's sort of funny to think about how widely BLM had penetrated the social consciousness, and it was just sort of, omnipresent and everywhere. And and it's funny to think now, 4 years later, that there's almost no mention of what happened in Atlanta. There's no mention in the press about where that money had went and how it was spent. On Monday, the BLM grassroots group, which is a kind of a splinter organization from the larger group, has to turn in tax filings to the California Attorney General, or they risk losing their tax-exempt status as a charity. Part of the reason why that's significant is that that filing will inform us where about $8.7 million of that $90 million had went. It's unaccounted for. It's with that organization. So we can kind of get into the nuts and bolts of these different organizations and why there's so many of them and what happened to them. But I think both of these, both Atlanta and both what's happening with BLM grassroots speak to the lack of scrutiny that's happening right now in the legacy press, which is, kind of asymmetrical to the amount of attention that these groups got 3 or 4 years ago when all of those donations were coming in.
I want to be kind of as generous as I can to people and not presume bad faith. I mean, when you looked at this stuff, did you also see places that money was being spent well? I mean, obviously, we have a lot of news stories that come out because the stuff that makes news is the bad stuff. I mean, a lot of money came into the BLM organization. I mean, was some of that money that you saw, that you see in tax filings, distributed to, good causes and decent causes too?
I think for sure. And I think a lot of that money went to, was well spent. And I think that, the organization was structured so that it was sort of a loose leadership, and then there's all these chapter organizations. And as all that money came in, it came in very quickly. And I think, any organization that suddenly was infused with $90 million is going to struggle with how to manage it and how to organize it and how to disperse it. And I think you can give a lot of leeway for that. And I think that, even the chapters themselves, there were dozens of chapters around the country, most of them are still active. They themselves said, look, we just want some of the money to run events and to do local reach out. And they did over time get that money, and they did. I think certain chapters were better well organized, and they were able to kind of, use what they were given and make a difference locally. But, systemically across the whole organization, I think that there were so many issues, and especially at the top where the money was handled, it starts to kind of strain. It's tough to be so generous after a while. I think that, the comment that came out of the organization was that, we were trying to fly the plane while we were building it. And I think that's probably a fair comment. But at the same time, while there was scrutiny of some of the money being spent for a $6 million mansion in Los Angeles in Studio City, there was a New York Magazine reporter who was talking with the leaders at that time, and he had obtained text messages and messages shared between the leadership. The same folks that were saying that we were having trouble building the plane while we're flying it were saying, how do we get out in front of this story? How do we kill it? How do we remove the fact that we're also using it for birthday parties and, we're crashing at the place? And, I think that they were very savvy about, how it was being perceived in the press. And I think that kind of back to that larger point, the press's role in this instance is to hold power and money to account. It's sort of basic fundamental tenet, right? And I think that if an organization has that much influence and power over the course of a year, and you spend a lot of time, documenting that the accumulation of that power in that influence, you also have to hold them to account. And I think it's fair to ask a lot of questions about where that money went and how it was used.
Yeah, I mean, Sean, you document some of this. I mean, some of it was really egregious, too. I mean, you can imagine someone taking a couple too many Ubers or expensing too many dinners. But as you mentioned, I mean, you're talking about a $6 million mansion. You also mentioned that there's a kind of adjunct mansion in Canada, the Canadian $4 million mansion. It's like, what is the justification for this stuff that is given? And is that stuff actually still in the hands of people who are in the leadership? Or has that, once under scrutiny, that, they had to sell it off or be a little accountable? I mean, it's incredible how sort of over the top some of these purchases are.
Yeah, I think that, so it gets a little naughty in terms of unpacking what the satellite of organizations are. When BLM started, they were known as BLM Global Foundation, and at some point, one of the leaders of a local chapter, there was a lot of frustration with how that money was being spent, and a leader there splintered off and took about it was like 30 of the local chapters and formed BLM Grassroots. And so you have global and grassroots.
Yeah.
And there's been lawsuits between the two of them over the money. And then there's also been this group called the Tides Foundation, which is a very large charity kind of pass-through organization that helps smaller charities manage their money and disperse their money. And some amount of money is still sitting with Tides, and there's a lawsuit between Tides and BLM Global. So it gets very confusing. It's very hard to kind of track where all the money went. But there have been some incredible purchases, I think, are worthy of scrutiny. And one is that the mansion you mentioned in Toronto. And I think that, you go back to 2020 and there's tens of thousands of people, sending in $5, $10, $50 to the movement. They're watching protests on TV, online, whatever. And I just, the mansion you mentioned, it's a Victorian mansion in downtown Toronto, a beautiful mansion that was converted into basically a kind of performative art space. And with residencies and all like for visiting artists. And it's tough to imagine when people were sending the money then that they anticipated that was where it was going to end up going. Remember the kind of core tenet of the movement was defund the police. And I think that a lot of the effort and a lot of the money that was spent has gotten really far away from that original intent.
All right, Sean, thank you so much, Sean Patrick Cooper, for being here. Check out his piece over at thefp.com. It's pretty sobering. Thank you, Sean. So now let's turn to our final segment. I want to talk a little bit to you about a story that's been huge in the news this last couple weeks. As you would expect in the final stretch of the campaign, an old favorite is being revived. Trump is literally Hitler. On Tuesday, John Kelly, who is Trump's White House chief of staff, said the former president fits, quote, into the general definition of fascist, and that he praised the loyalty of Hitler's Nazi generals. At the CNN town hall with Anderson Cooper that we referenced earlier, Harris said she too believes that Trump is a fascist. Take a look.
Ask you tonight, do you think Donald Trump is a fascist?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And I also believe that the people who know him best on this subject should be trusted.
All right, I just want to point out quickly before we go forward, at the same time in that interview, I noticed it this morning because I was watching it this morning, that Anderson Cooper said to Kamala Harris, do you believe Donald Trump is anti-Semitic? Donald Trump, who of course has a son-in-law who he entrusted with a lot of stuff in the Middle East, is Jewish. His daughter converted to Judaism. And Harris said, I believe Donald Trump is a danger to the well-being and the security of America. She would not answer that question. It is very odd to believe someone to be a fascist, but not an anti-Semite, a very strange definition. But lots of our peers in the media are embracing this line. Steve Generational Wealth Schmidt of the Lincoln Project spoke to Mehdi Hassan, who has said some sort of slightly fascistic things in the past, which he's apologized for. They were talking the other day on a Substack Live conversation, and this is a quote that stuck out to me.
Utilizing rhetoric and hate that is no different than anything that came out of the mouth of a Stryker or Goebbels about Haitians eating cats and dogs. This is
poisoning the blood of our country, straight from Mein Kampf.
All right. Look, there's a lot to say about this. I just want to quickly say two things. The rhetoric of Donald Trump is inexcusable, and he's someone I won't be voting for, and I have contempt for. And unfortunately, because of the behavior of some people in the media, you end up sounding like you're defending him. But two things here is that, first of all, the pronunciation of Goebbels maybe should be revisited. To say that there is no difference between Stryker. Now, for those of you who don't know what he's talking about, the subtitle there said Stryker as if it was a position in soccer. Stryker is Julius Stryker, the former editor-in-chief of Der Stürmer, which was a publication published in Germany before the Nazi period in the 20s until 1945. Julius Stryker was put on trial at Nuremberg and executed. And if you have to look at something that I think is probably one of the most racist newspapers and most anti-Semitic things ever produced, it would be Der Stürmer. And keeping in mind that they had a little tagline at the top of Der Stürmer that said in German, "Die Juden sind unser Unglück." The Jews are our misfortune. On every copy that you got, and the cartoons there are rather hideous. To say that the rhetoric has no differentiation that Steve Schmidt can find between what Trump says, admittedly very bad stuff, and Julia Streicher is despicable. It is wrong, and it is ahistorical, and it does not do any justice to people who are actually victims of Nazi crimes. Here's the New Republic back in June. This is a cover from the New Republic that decided to take what was a 1932 campaign poster and replace Hitler's head. It was a floating Hard Day's Night like Hitler poster, replaced the floating head with Donald Trump. And they explained this, by the way, by saying that anyone transported back to 1932 Germany could very, very easily have explained away Hitler's excesses and been persuaded that his critics were going overboard, etc. One thing that I think is really interesting is that to say that we're in a Weimar moment, that these very similar now, and if you want to go Google and say Weimar Republic, America, Trump, etc., what people don't really understand about this is that there was a very political, very specific moment in Weimar Germany. There's another poster that year that it reminded me of, and I dug it up and it said, over 300 National Socialists died for you at the hands of Marxist subhumans. You notice a difference there. 300 National Socialists. Not totally wrong, because there were street fights all over Germany at the time. We're talking about a place that was consumed with political violence. We have no such thing in America right now. Obviously, there's a big difference in the economy, et cetera, but people were murdering each other on the streets of Weimar Germany, and we have nothing similar today. To say that those two things are similar is wrong. To say that there was a democracy, flowering democracy, that was destroyed in the 1930s by the election of Hitler is partially wrong too. It got a lot worse, but the Weimar Republic in the late 1930s was itself something of a dictatorship being run by emergency decrees. So the point of this is very simple. I very, very much take exception to the idea that all the hideous rhetoric that we get from Donald Trump, and again, the clarification that this stuff is very, very bad and I don't like any of it. But if it's Hitlerian, what do we make of rhetoric that is actually deeply anti-Semitic, that is deeply racist, in a obvious case that is the goal, which is an exterminationist ideology, which Adolf Hitler laid out in 1925 in his book Mein Kampf. If that's fascism and this is fascism, are those the same things? I don't think so. We can attack Donald Trump. We can say Donald Trump is the worst thing that ever happened to American politics without saying that Donald Trump is Hitler. One final point on this I saw this morning. Just wanted to throw this in. I saw two people who were journalists saying that they expect if Donald Trump wins in a few weeks that they will be put into camps. Charlemagne the God, who I have a lot of respect for, by the way, was on with Anderson Cooper. He said, why are you talking about Kamala Harris when you're not talking about Donald Trump's fascism and how he said he's going to put people in camps? What is that a reference to? Well, Donald Trump has said, and polls unfortunately say a lot of people agree with this, that if you're going to deport people, you have to house them somewhere. To say camps, to say Nazi, to say Hitler, to say fascism is redolent of what? It is redolent of the Holocaust, putting people in camps. Do we truly believe that? Do we truly believe that that is upon us? I don't want to see a Donald Trump presidency. I expect a lot of you don't either, but let's be serious. We're not going to end up in camps if Donald Trump wins. We're not going to have a Nazi dictatorship. Let's fight fair and call out Donald Trump for the things that he says and the things that he does, and not go about destroying history and undercutting the seriousness of things that happened from 1933 to 1945 and all of those victims, to say that we are like them. We are not. All right. Well, thanks for joining us today. I want to thank Nellie Bowles, Olivia Reingold, and Sean Patrick Cooper for joining me. And thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll be back next week And let's take a minute now to put in your calendars. Election night with us. I won't be being that serious during election night. It's just the thing that pissed me off. We'll be hosting a huge live event. It'll start at 7 p.m. on November 5th, and we are going all night, and we have a lineup that is amazing. I just saw it today, and I was surprised. It's like the traveling Wilburys. It's all the good people. So you don't have to watch that crappy, shitty cable news. And if you haven't already, go to thefp.com and subscribe so you don't miss anything. We'll remind you of the programming that night if you do subscribe. See you next time.